it's one thing to get a story wrong. It's one thing to misunderstand or whatever, but it's an entirely other thing to intentionally take things out of context, intentionally leave things off the table, intentionally paint a picture that is not true. The Smithsonian story that came out yesterday, this is prime example of that.
Yes, this one really annoys me. And this is a certain thing that mainstream media does a lot, particularly with Donald Trump, in that it's a certain form of resistance journalism, if you will, where they don't come out and say Donald Trump believes slavery is good. That's not the headline. The headline today was, this is the New York Times, Trump says Smithsonian focuses too much on, quote, how bad slavery was, end quote. Now, that headline is very specifically crafted to present a couple of thoughts in your head, right? You're supposed to think, wait a minute. Trump thinks the Smithsonian is focusing too much on how bad slavery is. Well, what he must mean is he thinks it's good, or there were good aspects of it that they're not focusing on.
Or it wasn't as bad. It wasn't as bad as everything.
Right. Like he's making some excuse for the horrors of slavery. And of course, if he did do that, it would be a story. Right? Like it would be a story if Donald Trump came out and said, you know what? Slavery actually wasn't that bad. It was pretty good. Overall, that's a positive. That's a real story. Yeah. Of course, he didn't say anything like that. And we know that, if you have a couple of brain cells, you know this for multiple reasons. Number one, you might note that politicians don't say things like that. Nobody says things like that.
But he says everything. He just says it.
Oh, that's right. He's the worst guy in the world. And of course, that's the person this headline is designed to lead that horse to water. That resistance warrior who already believes everything terrible about Donald Trump. This is another thing for them to make them hate him more because they're the only people who could possibly believe the spin you're getting from the Times. They're the ones that are going to drink after they're led to that water, right? Those people are the targets. We know that politicians, even if politicians believed something like that, which of course most people don't, almost no one does, but even if a politician did believe that, they don't just blurt it out. That's not the type of thing people do. So you're supposed to think in the parentheses of your mind, you're supposed to say, oh, well, he just let that one slip out. He does believe it. He normally wouldn't say it, but he just lets it slip out. Another reason you should obviously know the spin is wrong. Donald Trump has said slavery is bad over and over and over and over and over again, like all other human beings in 2025, right? He said it over and over again. Now, in parentheses, you're supposed to think all those times were false. So he was lying all the other times, but this one time he let the truth slip out, which is that he thinks slavery actually isn't all that bad. Now, both of those things are insane to believe, but of course, it's not the main thing that should convince you. It's the context of how he was talking about this. He wasn't saying that slavery wasn't bad. What he was saying quite clearly was the Smithsonian, an American institution, was focusing too much on the negatives about our history rather than the positives of our history. And that we should instead have more focus on the positives. We know this because he actually said it. He said, quote, his complaint was nothing about success, nothing about brightness, nothing about the future. In other words, this American institution should talk a little bit more positively about America, not erase everything negative about America. It's like if you went to, the New England Patriots Hall of Fame and Museum, and every display was about Eli Manning and Nick Foles. It's like, yeah, they did have a couple of Super Bowl losses. Sure, that's part of their story. But if you looked at it and everything was about, the Eagles and the Giants winning those games, you'd have no idea that they had a dynasty in there, right? Like that they're one of the best football teams of all time. You would totally lose that. And that's the real story of America. I know you focused on this, Glenn, because you, in your museum, do have a lot of things that are bad about American history.
No, I collect... David Barton has collected so much of the good stuff, and I collect the dark stuff. Because if we don't teach our kids that these dark things happened in this country, two things happen. One, They don't believe us on the good things. When they hear those dark things and they didn't come from us, they just automatically think, well, you're lying to me about the country. You never told me about any of this stuff. Okay. So you have to tell the worst parts of it. You have to. The second reason it is really important is if you don't teach that, you will repeat it. Even if you teach it, we generally repeat it. But you have a better chance if you can teach it. History, here's the problem. The Smithsonian and everybody else is trying to make history about now. Right now. What does this mean right now? I'm going to judge it through the eyes of right now. Well, history is about the past. It's about the past. How did people think back then? Why did they think that way back then? Who fought against that at that time? What was the real argument? I mean, there are people now, scholars, who will tell you that Frederick Douglass never said a good word about the Constitution. Well, that's just absolutely dishonest. Frederick Douglass was a guy who said the Constitution is a slave document. And then he was told by, I can't remember who, but he was told by, because we have the book at the library at our museum. He was told, read The Unconstitutionality of Slavery. When he read that and then went back and read the Constitution in that light, he was like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest freedom document of all time. But people want now in academia and in our museums, they want to say no, because their goal is to get rid of the Constitution. My goal is to make sure we don't make these same kinds of mistakes again. I want to know the truth. Let me be the judge. Tell me the good and the bad. Tell me honest history. That's what I want to know. They don't do that. I was up at the portrait gallery. Tanya and I had to go to the White House for something. Oh, it was the interview. And so we had a couple of hours before the interview with Donald Trump. And so I went to the National Portrait Gallery. And now, Stu, tell me what you think might be in the National Portrait Gallery.
I would maybe guess that they're portraits of important figures in American history.
Portraits. Okay. First of all, it was the dirtiest, most filthy museum I have been in. It was filthy. It's like, I mean, we walked in, I thought we were walking in like some sort of employee door. Honest to God. You were with me, weren't you, Jason?
Yeah.
It was like we walked in like the back door. I really thought we were in the wrong place because it was filthy. Nope, that was the front door. So we get in and we start seeing, and there's portraits and they've got some really great art. But you start to notice things like, wait a minute, this is the National Portrait Gallery. Why do you have a 1970s girls' swinger bicycle with Cuban flags and stickers of Che on it? What is that all about? Okay? And there was a good portion of the portrait gallery that was like that. They had one room, and if you've ever been to like a science museum and they have a big dinosaur, and they have all the bones up there. Okay. It was about that size. And correct me if I'm describing this incorrectly, Jason, you remember it. It was in the last room, this big, huge gallery, and it looked like bones, like a vertebrae, okay? And it came out, and it was across most of the room, probably 70% of the room had this in the center of it. Agree with that, Jason?
Yep, perfect.
And it was bronze or gold or something, and they were fists. Well, what are those fists? That was the Black Power fist given at the 68 Mexico City Olympics. Okay, Black Power. Hey, what did that cost us? What did that cost us to install? And what does that say? What is that? Again, completely for no reason. You want to do a deal where you're talking about For instance, not maybe in the portrait gallery, but you're doing an exhibit on pushback, on rebellions, on people who have moved the civil rights for whatever it is. That's where that belongs. But it seems as though everything is telling us it's a bad nation and communism is neat. This is our government's pay for, our tax dollars pay for this museum. People come from all over the world to learn about America. And all they hear about America is we're a bad place and communism is neat. What the hell is that? That all should be, I mean, I'd give my right arm to be on the council of the art museum. It would drive them out of their minds. Out of the art museums and the Smithsonian, I'd give my right arm and maybe part of my left arm to be able to do that because it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And I'm a guy who wants to tell the dark side of America. But that's like if I said to you, I want to tell the good side of America. We beat the Nazis. And so every museum, the point of every museum always led you back to we built the Nazis because of we broke the back of the Nazis because of the greatest American generation. That's one story of America. Mm-hmm. That's not the story of America. That's one story. You want to tell slavery, tell both sides of slavery, not just the horrors of slavery, but the miracle of those who were white, who stood up and tried to stop it. Tell the story about how our founders sent out an armada. This is early 1800s. We sent out an armada because we stopped the slave trade in America. We said there's no more slave trade. You know, if you're born here, then that's fine. But it was a compromise. It was a progressive move. Take it a little bit at a time. And so what they did, because the slave trade was still going on, our Navy sent ships off the coast of Africa, and they were there for, I don't want to say because I'm going to get this wrong, somebody will fact check me, but a long time. And all they were doing was if there were slave ships that were coming out, they'd turn them around and say, go back to Africa. Okay? Do you even know that story? Do you know the story about our pilgrims arresting the captain, our pilgrims arresting a captain of a slave ship and then taking up a collection amongst themselves, restocking that ship with more food, cleaning it up, taking everybody out of chains, hiring a new captain with their poor people, with their money, and sending them back home to Africa. Do you know that story? Why? Why isn't our museum telling that story? I absolutely want the story of slavery told, but I want it to be told in context. And it's not the story of America. It is one of the stories of America that, thank God, we fought. We're the only country in mass where one race of people fought and died for the freedom of of another race of people. We're the only ones. So please, give it a rest. So dishonest.